Kelly and I are excited to have Travis Allison, the co-founder of Go Camp Pro and the person who put Kelly and I together to host the Camp Owners podcast. We sit down to talk about all things industry today as we look at the year that has been, the challenges, and a look forward to what the industry holds in the coming years. It's a really great discussion, and thanks for joining us. Enjoy the Camp Owners podcast. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We're going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hello, everyone. My name is Howie Grossinger. Glad to be back with you. I am the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada.
Hello, listeners. I am Kelly Shuna. I'm the co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp, located in Stillwater, Minnesota.
If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at GoCampPro/OwnersPod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen. Hello, Kelly.
Hello, Howie. Howie, this is like a big episode. Like we're interviewing the big boss man here. I'm feeling a little like, ooh.
I know.
Wow.
I think I may have put some product in my hair for the YouTube effect, but I'm just probably the first time in 13 months, but I'm just saying.
You're looking dapper, Howie. You are looking dapper for this episode. You know, we got to like really season it up at the end of our second season here. So today, listeners, as we approach the start of our camp season, after the year we've all had and continue to have, we thought it would be really great to have a conversation with Travis Allison, the co-founder of Go Camp Pro, and someone so familiar to all of us in the industry. He is the co-host of the Camp Hacker podcast and is responsible for all of the podcasts on the Go Camp Pro network and is the person who brought Howie and I together. Travis is also the incoming president of the Canadian Camping Association. Congratulations, Travis. That's a big honor. Our goal today is to have an open discussion on important topics of the last year and to really get Travis's take on the industry, like state of the state in general and where he sees things going. So welcome, Travis.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here.
Really nice to have you, Travis. So familiar to everyone in the industry, and you've done so much over many years, and particularly in the last year, in sort of mobilizing our whole industry through all the work that you've been doing and your team has been doing. But like the typical fashion of a Camp Owners podcast, what people may not know, because perhaps on your own podcasts or the other material that you share with people, they may not know your origin story. And I really think that with the work that you and Beth have done over many, many years, while I am familiar with much of your journey in camping, I really think Kelly and I would really like for you to just tell everyone how it all started. And I know that you've done so much work with youth and now being such a great resource to the industry. So with that, first of all, thank you for joining us. And number two, we're really eager to hear all about Travis and camp and get this discussion going.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you both. I'm grateful to be here. It's an honor. My camp story is, I went to the camp. I grew up at the camp that my parents, my mom and her brothers and my grandparents went to. One of the coolest moments in my camp life was organizing a cupboard at Camp Kintail when I was their summer program director and finding a photograph of my grandfather outside of a tent when he was 16 years old. Wow. And it was a big part of our family story because when he was 16 years old, so shortly after that photo was taken, his father died and he was forced at 16, he had to take over his family business so he could support his mom and his two sisters. So it was his last camp experience. He went there a number of times for other youth events with my grandmother. one of which they had borrowed a friend's two-seater coupe to take 3 people up to a youth event at camp. And my grandfather rode in the trunk for almost 3 hours on gravel roads to get to camp. There's lots of camp stories in my family. It's been a big part of our family identity, certainly my own identity. I fought against being a camp person, went to college to become involved in international development work. And after my first year of college, I spent the summer in the city. And by Labor Day, I changed my major and said, that's it, I'm a camp director. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's it. And then you've gone on to lead camp organizations, of course. I know that.
Yeah.
And that has morphed into consulting and being a resource to the industry as well. And like myself and so many, and Kelly included, we've had the pleasure of sitting in workshops with you, and you providing some insight into some of the most relevant issues in the industry. And I think that this talk today is about, and I wouldn't say it's going to be necessarily a rapid fire discussion with, Travis's take on, topics, but we do want to definitely, get your take on sort of the temperature of the industry and some things you see. And Kelly and I have put together, some topics, and, your thoughts, Kelly, on having Travis with us.
Oh, like I said, Howie, it's quite exciting. I love it, but I'm a little nervous. So we got to be on our best behavior here. No, I'm thrilled. When Howie suggested having you on, Travis, for me, it felt like a worldly, big picture umbrella perspective of looking onto the camp world. And you are in it, but I think when you are owning a camp or directing a camp, you see a bigger picture, but you are hyper focused on your camp and in your surrounding area. But I'm really curious to hear what that, 500 level or looking out. I like picture you on a mountaintop, Travis, and you are looking out upon, like the Lion King, along everything that the sun touches. And so I'd like to hear from you what the view looks like of the land that the sun touches.
I feel like we should cue the soundtrack. Maybe we get Matt at this point when it's actually going. We cue like Simba being lifted or something.
There was. I did my best.
I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah.
Yes. So tell us, Travis. Tell us what you have learned about the industry in the last year, and just what your perspective has been.
Thank you. So, yeah, it's been interesting. I do have an unusual perspective on this. I haven't been a camp director since 2007, which still freaks me out to say out loud. But I've been involved in the industry full time as a consultant, providing professional development for camp leaders since about 2009. So I do get to see, in normal years, I do get to see lots of camps and go on site and see how programs run. And certainly there's also this perspective of running the Summer Camp Professionals Group and some of the other things we've done this year to try to keep the industry, frankly, just working together. I had a suspicion that it was going to be panicky. People were going to be struggling to stay their best campy selves in this past year. And I really wanted to just give as many tools as we could to keep everybody talking and open with each other and patient with each other, and understanding that there are points that people won't be able to be their best campy selves. And and it's been an amazing perspective to see. I think people have been, on the whole, great, continuing to be amazing at sharing. I always feel like my goal for Go Camp Pro and all the things we do, all the newsletters, the COVID-related newsletter we put out called The Brief, the Summer Camp Professionals, etc. I just want those to be an open source summer camp. I want it to be a place where everybody can pull what they need, everybody can contribute, everybody can ask and get answers. And that hasn't changed. In fact, there's been a lot of spin-offs of Summer Camp Professionals that have helped people address really very specific needs. And I think that is wonderful. That is what I want to see in the industry. So people have undoubtedly been stressed out. we used to run summer camp professionals with 4 moderators. It now takes us 20 to run with the same number of people, and it's just everybody's so stressed. And we get that. And I think that this coming year is going to be harder on the industry, frankly, than last year was. Last year we were all in it together. There were some states that allowed some camps to open and others chose not to. I know that that was stressful for both sides of that decision, and I think it's going to be exacerbated more this year. There were already medical camps, et cetera, who've said we can't run overnight camp. There are different jurisdictions that haven't given permission for the camps to run, and it's, we're recording this at the beginning of May, and that is just incredibly stressful for our industry. So we're pulling together like camp people should, and I love that. I worry about the state of stress of people who own camps and what they have to go through and what their decision is going to be. And yeah, there's lots of things to be proud of, and lots of things that we're going to have to continue to just take a deep breath and dig back in again. And we're good at that as camp leaders in very short periods of time. We're used to doing that for 2.5 months in the lead up to camp. I think most experienced camp owners and camp directors will know that camp starts, you get to the end of the first week, you take a deep breath and you're like, okay, it's rolling. Now I can enjoy it. But the time leading up to that is so stressful, and we're in it now, but we've been in it for a year. And yeah, I'm worried about that for sure. I'm worried about what that's going to cost our industry in terms of young leadership and the continuation. I'm worried about the business involved in summer camp. Frankly, I'm worried about our business. I don't know if there's going to be the amount of availability for external projects that people bring us in for. We'll have to see. So there's lots of positives. It's fun to see camps that are ready and opening, that have states and jurisdictions that are like, yes, do it. It's nerve-wracking to see camps who are just saying, we're just going to do it. We don't care about the policies and procedures and the advice to change up the way programs run. I worry about how that affects the rest of us in terms of reputation. And I'm encouraged by the people that we want to serve, who continue to come together for each other, to put out more and more things that help us help each other. We've done a lot of that, but there are so many other organizations that have stepped up, and companies and individuals who've started meaningful discussions. And frankly, I think the industry has changed how we talk to each other in this year. It's much more immediate. There are many more ways for people to gather together in small groups and unwind, explore ideas, cry, encourage, and push each other to be creative. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but that's what I don't know how it would be any other way right now.
I agree. I mean, listen, I think that's a wonderful sort of overview of what has transpired over the year. But also, as Kelly said, we are at our core community builders within our own organizations. And we put a lot of effort into creating. And of course, we've had so many wonderful guests on the show who've talked about how, culture and how staff culture is, leads to camp culture and all those things. But, in many ways, Travis, and I'll say this because I know I'm up for renewal, but but the reality is that you and your team have sort of seen the entire industry as a community that has created avenues for that fellowship and for the opportunity to, connect in ways that are very specific to the crisis at hand, but also just creating the kind of identification that, you're not the only one going through this. And I think that the menu of items on the network and the stuff that even on Summer Camp Pros and the Slack chat, like everything that the topics that are there, there's something for everybody. And, we've talked about, and Deb Gilboa has talked about this, that you never waste a good crisis, right? And I think that to me is one of the things that this crisis has done. It's allowed the community to come together, which number one tells us we're not alone. And number two, and I think this is a message that I know within our area of Ontario, which currently at the time of this recording and broadcast is still going through a lot of unknowns in our neck of the woods of camp operating, is that I think I'd like to think that there's a healthy message that if you are running with camp, you're not being cavalier. And if you decide not to run, you're not a traitor or a coward or anything like that. Like I strongly
Yes, yes,
believe,
yes, yes.
I feel like that messaging needs to resonate. You know, we all run different operations in different circumstances, but at the end of the day, the future of the industry and how we get out of this, because the people who choose not to run or switch, you know, what is typically the way they do camp, you know, we want an opportunity for everyone to come back at the time that they feel it's right for them, their community, their organization, their business, etc. And I think that a lot of the work that you've done, you know, for me has, you know, maybe not as specifically said what I just described, but I think you've provided a sort of a framework for hopefully there's a little bit of everything for everybody, you know, as they move on to whatever it is they choose to do. And we know that jurisdiction by jurisdiction, it's just super different and still in so many ways. You know, yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that, Kelly, because I think there was so much there that Travis shared.
Yeah, there was a lot, and I really liked it. Travis, what really resonated with me, or what I was thinking about on a different angle, Howie, was when Travis was talking about coming together and bringing out the best and also the hardest parts. I think often when there is a tragedy or conflict or a situation such as what we've been in, the personalities get magnified, and our best traits and some of our not so great traits are really magnified. And honest, on a lot of times, our greatest strength is our greatest weakness. And I think I've seen a lot of that and a lot of vulnerability of this really shines a light on those strengths and also those same strengths that can be our biggest weaknesses. And for me personally and as an industry, and I often think about that analogy of the palm trees and how they have to crack and break in order to withstand the storm. And if they don't crack and break, they will fall over, but they need to have those small little cracks and breaks as they grow, so that when those big winds come over or come upon them, they can bend, but they will come back. And I think I'm feeling, and I have felt, and I think you as well, Howie, and Travis too, but I felt a lot of those cracks this year, and they hurt, and I feel very vulnerable and exposed in those ways. But I know that the growth is happening at the same time, and I'll be way better in the bend in the coming months and years and my whole career. But it's very vulnerable time for sure. And we all have to work extra hard to make sure we're pulling together and being positive, having positive voices with each other. But yeah, it's been tough. So that, like, your worry about the people part of the industry is very, very real. And that stress is very, very real.
Yeah, I think so. You know, Travis, I'm sure like Kelly and myself, people, and I think this whole, as we come out of this at whatever time frame we do, like even within our own organizations, the people we network with, our small circles of camp people in the industry, like I'm sure there have been moments where we've seen sides of colleagues and people we work with that we haven't seen. And this situation has done remarkable things to us, both positively, and has exposed certain things. And I think we all have to be, just as we are at camp, forgiving and give people a pass, and and allow people to do what they do. And I think for the most part, I've seen it, and it's
Good.
been so encouraging. And I know as I embark on my own training of staff and the preparations we're doing, like that's a big part of the messaging that I'm going to be doing. And I'm in a moment, I'm really curious to hear what Travis has to say about this, but I've said this before, I am obsessed with Ted Lasso, and Kelly
Yes.
knows this. I'm
Heard so much. Yep.
obsessed. And Ted Lasso and leadership has become a framework for my themes this year with my team. And if you haven't seen it, go see it. You've heard me say it before, but be curious, not judgmental. Ted Lasso in a nutshell. And there's so many great training pieces. I know that I'm going to try and use that, but I see that a lot. Travis, I'm curious about you, sort of your reaction to some of these things we've been talking about.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things, we are going to be doubling down on this idea that camp should be open source, that we should share 10 times more than we ever do. There's no industry like ours for sharing. Um, and the openness. And I recall one of my favorite moments as a camp leader. Beth and I were having a discussion about leaving the camp that we were directing and finding a camp to buy for ourselves. And so we called up a friend of ours who had just bought a camp. He'd been a camp leader for a long time. Some of you will know Jeff Bradshaw. We just called him up and said, Jeff, can we have a couple of minutes? And we showed up at his office. He's like, come on, I'll spend an hour with you. We showed up at his office and we sat down and we said, Jeff, we want to talk to you about, he said, hold on. And he just went, and we didn't even told him we were there for. He just went and he found his whole binder of how he started his whole new camp from scratch and filled it in the first year. He's like, I know what you're here for. And he dropped the binder in front of us. It's like, here's everything you need. We're like, amazing. We didn't end up being able to do that, to be able to pull that off, but it just that to me is like, that's leadership. I want this whole situation to be like that. So we are, as a company, going to be doubling down on how do we do this. It's going to mean some big changes in the stuff that we do, but I want the people who are like, yes, I'm there, here's everything, we want to be a part of sharing with everybody. And I want the people like, that sounds interesting, I want to see how that feels and I want to try it out for me. I don't want the people involved that are like, I'm just here to take all of your ideas and not share it on my own. I don't want them there. And that's been our whole purpose in the network, is how do we share as many ideas as possible. I've had the great privilege in the last number of years of being involved in Seth Godin's MBA program. And Seth is a camp alumnus. And his program is very campy in its own way. One of the metaphors for the coaching team, of which I am a coach, one of the metaphors for the coaching team is we call ourselves the Grove. And I think of camp leaders in the same way. We'll call ourselves the Grove because of the understanding of what an aspen tree is, that an aspen tree is not one tree. The entire grove of aspens is one tree with different trunks coming out of the same root system. And I think of camp, that's what I want. I want people who want to be part of the grove of camp leaders. That's how we are successful. That's how we survive an incredibly challenging next couple of years. We don't even know. Dr. Fauci said we're in the era of pandemics. We don't know when this is going to end or how, but I think together we can work to save camps, this experience for kids, even these beautiful properties that I'm worried are going to end up, some are going to end up going to developers and we'll never be able to use them as summer camps again. But I think we can do it together.
I love that idea.
The grove is amazing.
Aspen tree. I did not know that until we recently went out to Colorado. We took a road trip out there and my husband told me that. And I love that idea related to the grove. I love that, Travis. I think that's beautiful. Very beautiful imagery and very true. So I like that very much.
I think that, that your last comments about sort of the future of these properties, I think is something that maybe I'd like to maybe shift our discussion to, because we are the Camp Owners Podcast and we try as much as we can to enter in sort of the business side of the conversation. And we've been lucky to have friends of the show like Jonathan Gold and Steve Baskin and people who have a good sense of approaches from a business point of view. But from the seat that you're in, Travis, as you look at sort of the business of camp and trends that you see that you might be coming out of this crisis, any insight, any things that your sense, no one has a crystal ball, but what's your sense of the business of our industry over the next little bit?
I definitely think that it will be challenging for any camp business to be a summer only business going forward. I think that we will have to think about how we have income year round. I don't know how we do it, but I think one of the lessons of 2020 is that camps need to have much more in the bank. We have to have more cash, and we can't do that just by raising fees. So we have to be more creative about that. One of the most inspiring camp owners for me is a woman named Megan Gardner, and she is Megan Gardner. She is the owner of the first camp is called the Guardians, I think, but Guard Up is the name of her company. And they are a STEM-based LARPing camp. So they teach science through kids dressing up and playing, and with all the staff too. And it's just brilliant to watch and to see. And there's so many great, one of my new pandemic hobbies is diving deep back into role-playing games that I was into when I was a teenager. And there's so many camp lessons in role-playing games. Every single senior staff should be playing role-playing games together from September to opening, everyone. Anyway, several distractions. Megan's camp.
We can unpack that at some point.
Sure. Megan's camp standardized their program and licenses it. So they are working with an incredible group of people. They've licensed their program, like all packaged up. They've licensed it to amazing organizations. And, their programs are available for you to license from them. And it is a great way to get kids involved, but it's so creative because their main source of income is not summer camp anymore. So I think we need to be smarter about what this it's just genius what we do. It is, but we have to be ready to describe it and write it down and standardize it enough that it still has all those good feels of camp and that flexibility of camp, and we can get more people to use it. So that's one thing. I think sites sitting empty is a problem. It's easier for us to maintain. So many people are going to have so many problems opening up this year because they didn't last year. And so there needs to be some flexibility there. But I think the leadership lessons of summer camp are an export that we could all dig in. I think there should be a conglomerate of all the camp owners and directors that is, here is the best leadership team that you can hire to come in and teach you. And everything like that we can be smart about income and growing so that we can protect the summers, we can keep the fees reasonable for family, and we can stay alive as camps. There are tons of opportunities, and we haven't up until now had to, lots of camps have done it, but most camps haven't had to say, all right, how do we be really creative about income? We've just said, how do we get more kids in? And that's not the right question anymore.
I like your phrase, protect the summer. And I think that's really, really, really valid, because we all came to that place that last spring. Okay, if we don't have camp, how will we make it through? How will we financially make it through? So I like that, protect the summer. I've been thinking a lot about bringing camp into the workplace, and how can we bring the workplace out to camp, and the team building and the games, and just what we're missing a little bit. So that's been something that I think camps could do for the workplace and for adults, and to also remind them of the value of camp for their children while they are also here going through the games and the team building, and just getting that fresh air. So I think that's a way that camps, one of the many, but I think that that's really smart, Travis, of how do you protect the summer? How do you have it so that maybe you aren't dependent on summer, that the off season is value too for you?
And I think you've got an idea, Howie, but if you don't mind, I want to jump on one thing.
Please.
One, it's like we have so much to offer, and we love to stand in our own circles and look inward and say, but we have so much to offer, and we have to get better at communicating that. We have like all of these things that we can offer to business leaders, etc. We are trapped in a trap of our own making, probably not camp owners and camp directors making, but camp people's making. people's perception of summer camp who don't know summer camp based on pop culture. And that is pop culture written by camp people. What Hot American Summer and Meatballs, written by camp people. And look what they did to us. It's funny for camp people and it's funny for others, but it does not help the industry. I had someone who wanted some kind of support from me to produce a movie that was about big changes in a camp. Went from a boys' camp to a co-ed camp, and they were writing this movie, and they just wanted me to help get some camp people involved or supporting a Kickstarter or something. And I was like, if this is more Meatballs and more What Hot American Summer, I'm not interested. I'm not gonna. I don't like what camp people have done to that. So we have that same problem with the leadership things that have shown up in pop culture that business movies and things where people go out and do a ropes course, and every camp leader is like, man, that is sketchy. We would never do it that way, but it's just written for the drama of the movie, but it makes us look bad. All of those written by camp people, and they're not people who work in camp. Mostly they're people who grew up at camp and were staff in summer and had their own perspective, but not this camp owner's, not camp director's perspective. So that's one of the things we have to get together and tell our own story better. I do think we have an incredible amount to offer, but that's repeating myself. And I cut you off, Howie. I wanted to hear what you wanted to say.
No, I think that what you said makes me think that those stories being told about camp from the perspective that they're being written has influenced politicians and government officials in the way they view camp and their confidence in us as professionals to deliver this careful and responsible approach to camp. And I think more than ever, these last 12 to 13 months, to the degree that I've been involved from an association point of view in terms of the challenges in getting public health and politicians to view camp and view us leaders, people who've dedicated their lives and have invested lots of money to deliver this thing we call camp, to dismiss things as either, well, we don't know if we can trust just sending a whole bunch of young people to this place and, God forbid there's an outbreak. But if they took the time to understand how historically we've managed challenges, health outbreaks, but you're right. In some ways, their viewpoint has been tainted by the imagery and the way that camp has been portrayed. And we need to own that story moving forward a lot better. I also think about, you mentioned cash, and, we thought that as business operators that, boy, this whole idea of we'll keep your deposit and we'll carry it over till next year. And we know we need to keep our, sites alive. And now we're like, oh my God, I have to even think of that again. And I think it just is sort of bringing to the fore, this kind of forward thinking we have to do around cash flow and year-round generation and the services we provide and how we can have greater access to our clientele and potentially new streams of revenue. So we're not as susceptible to, the kind of reaching out for perhaps loans and things that much of the industry is doing, and who knows how long it will take for us to get out of that. And I think the last thing related to the business of camp is I worry for all of us about how attractive camps will be to purchase in the future. The impact, the impact of what has happened to our industry for people who've grown up, who may want to pursue that, not only as leaders, but investors in taking over a camp or creating their own thing. This crisis, the opportunity to come out of this, to get back on track so people can see this as the industry many of us saw when we got into it. I'm nervous that the motivation for that if we don't come out of this properly, could be really in jeopardy as it relates to succession, as it relates to
Yep.
putting your camp up for sale, and not just going to the developers, but just continuing, what your family or your team has created. So those are the things on the business side that I'm up. Any immediate thoughts on that, Travis?
So I think about this in a couple of different ways. I have a client that's not in the camp industry that has a couple of very specialized machines in their business, and they're incredibly expensive. Like each machine's worth several $100,000, and this business only runs those machines for 2.5 days a week, and they sit still for the rest of it, which is like this totally the metaphor for summer camp. And I just keep saying, if you have these machines, which you are paying a mittful every month on maintenance contracts and and the loans on these machines, if they're sitting empty, they're not making you money. If they're not running, they're not making you money. And I have spent, I don't know, 5 or 6 years trying to convince this person to expand their business, and they're worried about all of the things involved in that, and that's frustrating. So that's a lot like camp that sit empty. A lot of our sites will not be able to use them in winter seasons. That's just the reality of it, but there is more that we could do with them. The other piece to this, Howie, is we have to, as an industry, I believe that camp should be better at bringing programs to kids, that we can't continue to just be, we have this beautiful place, come and see us. That if we are serious about our mission, we're serious about even our business growth right now, we have to get better at bringing kids to camp, whether that is taking camp to the city and to specific neighborhoods that we've never been in, or supporting the neighborhoods that already support us. I don't care. But I also think for longevity, we have to, I hate saying have to, I'm sorry. I think camps would be wise to think about how to do virtual programs for every day going forward, that we can run virtual programs all year round. Without our site facilities, our staff can be wherever they are at college and away. We should also be running virtual programs every single summer, that it runs in parallel to our on-site programs, because virtual programs allow us to reach more kids from an area that we couldn't serve before. It allows us to reach younger kids and allows those families to build up their trust in our organizations to eventually send them to camp. And the smart camps will be thinking about that going forward, because revenue generation with a lot less overhead, because it ups the impact of what we can do. And that's the kind of thinking that I'm interested in. How do we up our impact, and how do we make more money? Those two things in parallel.
I think it'll be less scary now for camps to shift.
Yeah, totally.
It's Howie's favorite thing. Necessity is the mother of invention, but I think it really has taken that stigma of everything virtual. Even for me, I was like, oh no, in-person interviews, you just can't I just can't read their energy. I like to think of myself as in an interview, an energy reader. But I was no in person. And now I just think we'll do all interviews virtually, because it's so much easier for everybody. But from that small thing to virtual programs, I really think it has forced us to shift and open our minds to that idea.
Yeah, I also mentioned to Kelly recently that, and Travis, we had Audrey Monkey as a guest, and she introduced us to the concept, and I do believe she's a trailblazer in this area, is the idea of the chief visionary officer.
Yeah.
And I know Kelly and I have just run with that since she sort of put it and framed it the way she did. But if anything, this last year has put us, the Howies, the Kellys, other camp owner directors, in the industry, really embracing that, our role within the organizations. I'm finding myself, I'm stepping back from some of the things I've traditionally done, because my focus has been, how do we take what we're so proud of doing, that we're hearing great feedback on, and how do we expand the circle? How do we expand our reach? And I'm finding that I am the one in my organization who's challenging the team, starting to think. So I thank Audrey for planting that. And but more than ever, coming out of this from a business perspective, I think, these are the things that we're going to have to do, because everything we thought that was a little far-fetched before, this year has taught us that it ain't so far-fetched, and it can be received quite well. So really, really, really good stuff. And I think we've already touched on this, Travis, but we were going to talk into marketing because it's such a big part of sort of your consulting world and some of the stuff that you're doing. But how does this relate to the messaging of the experience? Much of us camp owners is providing families with the peace of mind, in a COVID world, that your kid, your child, your young adult is going to be, we're going to provide as safe as possible. But just generally speaking, what are some thoughts around the promotion and marketing of camp coming out of this while we're still in it, in terms of some of the work and conversations you're having with people?
I think one of the things that is one of the most interesting opportunities, and it's scary for lots of camp owners, I fully acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that we have been an organization that serves people of privilege. And that means that there are gobs of kids. There are so many kids who have no camp experience. And we have to get better at doing the thing that we say that we're great at. We have to get better in our marketing, in building relationships and allowing people the long-term ability to grow in their trust of us. So that means it means a lot. Frankly, it's just little things, like it means us doing a lot more video. It means us going to communities that we haven't traditionally served and just getting to know people. We are, as an industry, and this is changing, and I'm proud of that. It's been something that I've been talking about for years. I think we have to stop saying that send your kids to camp and they'll have a magical experience, because we have to tell people what that means. We have to be better at showing people what that is. And then we have to put up faces that don't look like every camp face that has been represented in media and frankly in our camp videos, going forward. And that's going to be a lot of hard work, but it's important. I think it's, other than just it's important, it's beneficial to a camp culture, and it's beneficial to a camp business to be as diverse as possible and serving as many families as possible. We have to accept that it requires an incredible amount of trust from parents to us to transfer that care to us. And we know that that's been hard with the families that we have been serving, and it'll be harder with those families we've chosen not to serve so far. But we still have to do it.
That's a really great lead in, Travis, to Howie and I really wanted to get your perspective on social justice and camp. You've been really, really heavily involved with Go Camp Pro and getting that out there and really partnering with some great people and organizations. So talk to us a little bit about social justice in camp and what that looks like right now.
Kelly, I think there's two pieces to this. One, Go Camp Pro is way too friggin' late in this game. Like, I'm just making up for the shame I feel for not having been sensitive, for saying one thing and not following up on it. And it's incredibly important work that we have been ignoring. So I'm trying to do better at that. We're trying to be very intentional about that and make up for us just sort of knowing that was a problem and saying it, but never doing anything about it. As an industry, we have an opportunity to be leaders in everything we do. One of my big theories is that as any kind of leaders, camp leaders in particular, that we have to deeply, to our bones, understand that we are always teaching. In every single thing we do, we are teaching some lesson, whether it's intentional or not. And it is, often the exhausting part of the summer of camp is being people watching you all the time to learn from you. but that has to extend past those moments when we're in front of the group, specifically leading something or specifically teaching. It has to extend to the rest of our day. And so we have to get better at showing our community. It goes back to what I said before. We have to be willing to do the work to build trust in what we offer. And we have to be smart and intentional about it. And we need to lean on each other. We definitely need to lean on the people who have put up with summer camp, despite the fact that they've come from a marginalized community that has not been well served by what we do. And we need to pay those folks to help us get better at that. And that it is hard, and I've said here, and I've said in other places, I feel shame for us not saying it and not doing it. We're gonna have to just dig into that. Like that's the right thing. I can't let it be our only motivator, but we have to acknowledge that we should have known. When I went to Camp Kintail in the 80s, and there were 2 Black kids at camp, that was a problem. And that I, sort of acknowledged it as a teenager, but just went on and didn't do enough. I think, yeah, it's going to be hard work, but it's essential. And the payoff for camp is we get to impact more kids, and, kids get to be changed by this community, and we as leaders get to grow. That's hard, but important.
It's been incredible, the awareness of growth. I think you get to a certain age, and you're like, oh yeah, I know so much. I mean, I'm so self-aware. Like, I think I'm really self-aware. And then things are brought to our attention, and you're like, oh, maybe I'm not so self-aware. I was in the Northeast Camp Conference, that's the new name. And I was in a session with Gemini, and it was really great about DEI and camp. And I'm like, yes, okay, like the work, yes. And I was in there, and she said, what's your takeaway? And I had put in the chat, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Such great ideas for training. I think I'm going to reach out to my friend who I did college. We were like orientation leaders in college, and we're really close. And she's Black, and she's a part of the BIPOC community. We work together already. So I'm going to reach out to her. And yes, because I don't think as a white woman, I should be speaking about diversity and color and inclusion, like, what do I have to say? But then someone put in the chat about, hey, you know what, you should think about if your friend, are we creating her as a token Black person and your token Black friend, and they're already being asked to do that work. And so really, should we be leaning on them to do that? And at first I was like, oh, that's not what I meant. But then I was like, wait a minute, Kelly. Okay. Yeah. Like, good point. I can talk about that privilege and from being a white person, and what can I do? And, so it's really that growth and that, that mirror back on us to say, hold up, so I don't know. That's been a learning thing for me. And yeah, you think you're aware and you think you're on that track, but there's always way more learning to do. But we have to be open to that reflection back on ourselves, I think. And that's hard. It is hard.
And I also think it's about being very aware of what you can reasonably do to inch your organization, your business forward on these things. It doesn't all have to happen, in terms of being reflective. You may go through an exercise with your team and bringing in people of color into that sort of process of identifying where we can be better, but not everything has to be done right away. And I think that, this topic and the way that Go Camp Pro and Summer Camp Pros and the work that Travis and the team are doing, I think has sent a really good message that you can really, by identifying and addressing and taking these steps forward, you're going to get to a much better place and a more comfortable place, and not feel some of the things that Travis described that he has felt. And I think we've all felt as we as we have grown up and have been leaders in an industry that generally can do better and needs to do better. And I think that these things this past year has allowed us to look at. And I just get a sense that more of us are just being very, very willing to embrace being better at this and identifying. And I think that's a step in the right direction. And that's what makes our industry so awesome, is I think there's a willingness to do that. And I think it's great because it's going to help everybody.
And to the camp owners listening, I think it's about, we do have a really great place to speak from, and those campers, and that's something that I've really been thinking about. I think we all have, is having that voice and using that voice for good, and using that clientele list and putting pronoun signatures on. And yes, I lost a camper because I put that on, but I also have to believe that I gained that trust of other families that didn't say anything, but they saw it. Or by putting the BIPOC Day of Unity on my Instagram, yes, lost a camper, but I have to believe that they're also, I'm having a voice for the people who don't have necessarily that same voice. So I think for camp owners, it really is, we have a really strong, powerful, beautiful voice, and using it in those ways is something we can do. It's all about what can we do. And I think that that's a really powerful thing that we can do, which feels passionate, feels good.
Yeah, agreed. And there's going to be hiccups along the way. I mean, how, the things we do on social, the things we do on, there are going to be hiccups, and we just have to be able to pick ourselves up and just make it better. I put out a publication. I've been very good. I've been trying to be, we're lucky, like many of us have a diverse camper population. I put out a publication that I personally was just so focused on the message that I didn't take into design as much. And I've been really good to celebrate the diversity of our program. And I had someone bring in, say, I noticed this time you didn't do as, this. And it was like, and I'm also learning not to beat myself up so much about it, and knowing that I'm just going to do better the next time I do this. And I think that's sort of what we need to do for ourselves. I hope that makes sense, because I really feel like, I think people should also see you for your intent and your willingness to do better too. And we can only hope that people see us in that light too. So, but I know that this is a hugely important topic that I think we're all addressing. I know we've talked a lot, and Travis has been so good at answering our questions in terms of sort of the next number of years. And obviously we have no crystal ball, but, Travis has already sort of touched on some things that the industry will need to do better. And obviously we've just had a nice discussion on social justice and BIPOC and the things that we need to do. We talked a little bit about, getting more out of our facility, more out of our brand in the next few years, and how we market, et cetera. Is there anything that we haven't touched on, Travis? Is there anything in the next 5 years you see the industry having to focus on that can, set us forth for the next 25? I don't know. We've talked about a few so far. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
I think the best way to sum it up is that we have to continue to be better storytellers. We have to continue to be open to hearing stories as well as telling them. That is what propels us forward. We have to be better at putting other people's stories forward, whether they're our campers, our staff, our camp families, and being good communicators of what the value of what we do is even more essential. It's never not been essential, but there was time when there weren't as many options for families, and camps were cheaper, where a lot more kids went to camp. Certainly not anywhere near as diverse a group of kids as we would hope for, but there was a time when more kids, a greater percent of the population experienced this. And and to get anywhere close to that, like I just see that as an opportunity. Like there's so many more kids out there. Let's get them. And we have to be patient. We have to build trust. We have to understand that growing what it means to be a camp person and who's represented in being a camp person has to change. And so that just means we work at building trust with people in families that we haven't not only not haven't had to, but just haven't taken and made the effort to build relationships with. And we're good at relationships. We can do it. It's going to be hard, but we can do it.
That's great. Well, that was a great segue to actually telling the story and building a relationship with our sponsor. And our sponsor for the Camp Owners Podcast is Camptivities. And I'm really, really happy to tell everyone about Camptivities. You end the call and your mind is spinning. Who can do scheduling? Who will you find the time to train to do scheduling and to explain all of the nuance and detail to make sure your schedules come out the right way? The only people who know anything about scheduling at your camp already have a lot on their plates. Does that sound familiar, folks? Does this mean a lot of late nights each week to get the scheduling done? Well, you go like we all do. You go onto Google and you Google an activity scheduler, and who do you come by? Camptivities. And we're really proud to have Camptivities as our sponsor. And they do so much, from auto scheduling to staff scheduling, camper and group scheduling, batch scheduling. Yes, I said batch. You can do multiple cabins at a time on your weekly and daily schedule. And while we don't have rain, we have liquid sunshine at camp, you may in fact need a rainy day schedule as well. If you need any of those things, we encourage you to check out Camptivities. I'm a proud user of Camptivities, and their team has always been available and great resources to us as we navigate our own scheduling challenges. So if you want to check out more about Camptivities, go to camptivities.com, set up a time to chat. Their team would be very willing to speak with you. And I can honestly say it'll help you get away from your desk and out at camp. And boy, do we need to get out at camp these days. So thank you to the Camptivities team, and happy to have them on the Camp Owners Podcast.
Delegate, delegate, delegate. That is one skill we will all be better at after this. So delegate to Camptivities. Give it to them. Great. So we are at one of my favorite parts of our show every week, Howie, where we share our inspiration. So we're going to share something that's inspiring us right now. This can be a book, article, podcast, documentary, person, leadership quote, anything that's helping us be better camp professionals right now. So I will start off as a good role model. For one of the first times, Howie, it's not a book or a Brene Brown podcast. I know, I can see the shock and awe on your face.
What?
I know. I'm just going real basic here, old school. As we've shared, it's been rough lately, really rough. And my camp comp's been kind of low and not, it's just been rough. And I hosted my first virtual parent orientation, and I didn't expect to see any kids. And there was kids in almost every single one of those Zoom screens. And it just instantly, I got all those feels. It almost made me verklempt. I had to hold the tears back, but I told those families, I said, I think I needed to do this more than anything, just to see their faces. And it gave me literally just what I needed to get through the next 6 weeks till I welcome campers. So it's just seeing their faces and their excitement, and it was so good, Howie. It was so good. So that's my inspiring thing, that if you're feeling that, just call up a family, FaceTime a family, and see their faces and how excited they are. And yep, I'm ready. Let's do this. So that's my inspiration for today. Howie, what about you?
That's an awesome one, Kelly. And knowing you the way that I do, I could see how that would be just so energizing and amazing. So that's a great inspiration. Mine is a book this week. We did a podcast earlier in the season with Saul Birnbaum and Rachel Kent on healing. Camp is a healing place. And the book that I want to share with everyone is a second book from the author Edith Egger. I had used her as an inspiration for her book, The Choice. And now she has a book out that I encourage everyone to read called The Gift, 12 Lessons to Save Your Life. Just a really inspirational book about perspective and, just the healing power of just living your daily life and the things that you do and say and the people you surround yourself with. So I would encourage people, who are looking for that kind of inspiration and that place in their life to check out Edith Egger's The Gift. So there you go, my Kelly Shuna book recommendation, which I always love to throw in there.
Oh, Howie, you know what? We know each other well. We know each other well. Travis, what about you?
Thank you. Pardon me. This is also a book recommendation, and you have to give me a second. I promise I'm going to bring this around. One of the books I've read in the last little while is Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower. I'm a science fiction person to the nth degree, and this is a story set in the middle of a very almost reasonable future, mid-apocalypse, and you can see all sorts of echoes of what's going on in our world right now. The main character, as a process of this, invents her whole religion, which is interesting. It's a good book, lots of good stories, and she begins to explore from the time she's a teenager her sort of philosophy. It's more of a philosophy, I think, than a religion. But anyway, one of the main tenets of this religion relates so much to camp, I can't stop thinking about it. And she does have a deity, but its deity is not a person, a representation of a person or bigger than person. Her statement is that God is change and change is God. And I am so obsessed with the thought in summer camp that change is God. We cannot fight that change will happen. And so we need to accept that this is a part of our life, that change rules everything. Change will happen whether or not we want it. And we have to embrace the fact that change is God in the world. But in our case, in the camp industry, that change is going to happen. Change will always happen. And as much as people rely on, our families and our staff rely on a lot of the sameness of camp, they look forward to that sameness. We also have to accept that change is God in our industry, and we're going to have to do it because there is no stopping change. And I've been thinking about that a lot as a metaphor for camp. So great book. You should definitely read The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. But my inspiration is just that we accept that change is God, and it's coming.
Amazing. Wow. Only on the Camp Owners podcast can we get Travis Allison to share his love of science fiction, role playing, LARPing. I mean, we got it out of him, Kelly. There you go. We did it. But
for those of you watching us on YouTube, my whole fidget this time has been a giant 12-sided dice from role-playing games. That's what I've been fidgeting with as I focus on Kelly and Howie today.
Well, this has been a real treat, Travis. Kelly and I are grateful for the opportunity to talk camp. It's, for us, during this whole period of time, has been a wonderful outlet for us to develop a really wonderful friendship, but also to meet some amazing people. So, I think I speak on behalf of Kelly when I say thank you, and just to pick your brain and get your thoughts on this. I hope the audience, and I know the audience, has benefited from it. So maybe I feel a timely opportunity to get into this discussion with you. So we appreciate you and all you do for the camp world. So yeah, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
I was just going to say, Howie, Travis is kind of like our professional matchmaker. I mean, we didn't know each other before this. So, I mean, it's like it's like a match made in camp heaven right here.
I know. It's like the BFF version of eHarmony.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. I just thought of something.
Camp best friends.
I think Tinder is a little hipper, Howie. So
well,
I know, but but I don't know if our partners would like us referencing those things as it relates to.
This is true.
Awesome. Travis, I know people know how to get a hold of you, but for our listeners who don't, what's the best way to connect with you if there's any questions or insight they'd like on what's up in your world?
I appreciate that. And let me start by saying thank you both for the invite. It has been a joy to have a great campy conversation with the two of you here today. If people want to get in touch with me, they can reach out at travis@gocamp.pro is my email. We are pretty active on Instagram at GoCampPro. And so we'd love to have you follow us there. And yeah, that's probably the best way, is to keep those two things in mind, looking for us on those places, and reach out to me by email.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kelly, how can people get a hold of you?
My email is typically best, Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com.
Amazing. And you can reach me at howie@camprobinhood.ca or on Instagram. And our camp Instagram is Camp Robinhood if you want to learn more about what we're up to as well. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and the other great Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. We just want to thank once again, Travis, Kelly. It's always great spending time and chatting camp with you. Thanks to everyone for listening. And we look forward to having you join us for the next episode of the Camp Owners Podcast. Thanks, everybody.